So this is the first example we're going to be doing, and we're going to be doing a single crown. There are lots of undercuts in this specific model, and there's also a lot of sharp edges. This is why I chose it. Now it is not in the center of the workspace, and we're going to put it there. So we're working with three modules: crown, wax up, and the model designer. In this example, we're not going to be using the articulator just yet, because as we're moving on, we're going to be getting into more complicated procedures. So we're going to go to the model designer and move this into the center. So we do this exactly like what we usually do. So one thing to note is when you click on the line, all of the separate little bits and pieces fall away. They are separated from the scan. So we want to actually get rid of a few of these. I'm going to open up the outliner and just explain what has happened. So here we actually got 1, 2, 3, 4 objects that we need, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 objects. That's because they've been separated. So I'm going to take these and Control I inverse and X delete. Okay, so now I've only got the models that I need on the scene. Next, we're going to go to the crown module. We're going to open up the first menu item, and it will prompt us to move things into certain collections. So the working model goes to the original model collection. So select the working. Then we're going to take the antagonist, and these have been moved to the correct collection. This is done so that we can hide and unhide things very quickly and efficiently. Note these little ones, if they are blocked out like this, it means we cannot click on them. I'm going to hide this, and we're going to go into the wax up module. There we're going to import some teeth. We're going to take the tooth that we need, and we're going to move this into the position. So do this as close as what you can. If you've got a different tooth library, you can use that as well. So we can see there's a lot of undercuts in this model. Okay. Now each and every tooth library is different, and the mesh geometry may be different. We need to standardize this for all of our crowns and bridges. Now the way we do that is we're going to move this into the correct collection. So here with the little car, it says move teeth to collection. This will not only move the tooth to the collection, it will remesh it at the same time. And it is hidden for good reasons so that we can now draw our line. Don't worry, it is over here. Okay, so if I look at the mesh now, it is completely different. So we have standardized this mesh so that we can work with it. We're going to open up the next collection, the next menu, and this time we're going to be drawing on the die. Now note the next one says section scans. We do not need to section the scans because they are already sectioned. As you can see, we've got them in 3 different sections. So if you wanted if you wanted to section it, the advantage is that we can draw the margin without all of the other models interfering. But for this one, we don't need it. We're going to go to the Draw Surfaces, select the die we want to draw on, shift right click as we usually do, and we're going to take this pencil. Now if you cannot select the model, this is the one to use so you can select the model. The top one is used for model designer margins to convert. We're not using this in this instance. Then we're going to click on Drawing, and the die should then disappear. Then we're going to click on Drawing, make sure it's highlighted, and then the die turns greenish, and then we have our line. E to extrude and left click to set it down. You can left click on it and then reposition the vertex. Once we get to the other side, we will then use the other one in our selection, shift left click and F. Now if we wanted to refine the margin a little bit more, we're going to click on subdivide. That will create more points, and then we can set these to a more precise location if we like to. So just check your work, and then following that we will then make our surface. So because this is a lower one, the button is on the bottom, okay, so it is color coded. So we're going to click on Create Lower Surface. This cuts out, duplicates it and cuts out a piece out of that die. Next we're going to go to the contact area because we want to block out these contacts. So again, you need to select it, make sure it's orange, shift right click to place the cursor and draw. E left click all the way. Again, if there's valleys and hills, place more of these vertices. We need to cut through this surface. So that's important that it does cut. If it doesn't cut, Control Z and then subdivide. One last one, make sure it's selected, shift right click and then draw. E to extrude. Now note that I'm going at an angle like this, because when we want to extrude this into our little die, we want it not to cut through. So we want the extrusion to go down with the actual vertices. Okay, so if I pictured drawing lines down, it can all draw nicely. So following that, we are color-coded green. We are finished with this menu. We're going to go to the next menu, and it tells us we need to survey now. So we're going to select our green surfaces, and then what we're going to do is, because it's green, we're going to click Survey Lower Surfaces. And note that you can still see this model, but this is completely independent, so we can move this along like this. So we want to get a good path of insertion. I'm having a look at the distals and the mesials, and then we're going to block out lower. Now that we're done with that, we're going to go to the next menu item. This is where we can set the drill compensation for sharp edges. So we need to select, before we get down to doing that, we need to select the contact areas. So this one and this one. And we're going to select and name lower contacts because these are lowers. Okay, select and name lower contacts. And this is so that we can then exclude them from all of our other abutments. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to select our abutment. It's called abutment. We're going to then check for thin areas. So if you've got a 1 millimeter burr, you can put in 1 millimeter over here. We've got info boxes here that tell you what to do. Then we're going to expose thin areas. So we've got a few thin areas over here. What we're going to do is we can paint on them to put more of a selection if we want to. So if you feel that your bird size or something needs to be bigger in certain areas, we can add there or we can take away. Okay, so it doesn't need to be there close to the margin. So it's basically we are blocking out this model a little bit more. So okay. So once that is done, we're going to continue. So this does it by marking the faces of the actual model. Then what we're going to do is we're going to block out the thin areas, and that creates a blob like this. And then based on that, this one we can scale. So this has been set to a 1 millimeter distance for a drill. You can increase this if you want to. Okay, but the default should be okay. Accept spacer compensation. Okay, so this will create a bit of a more of a spacer on top. Now we are done with this menu. Next one, we're going to make support margins. So make sure it's selected, your surface abutment is selected, and we're going to add either 0.05, 50 micron or 100 micron. Let's add 100 micron. You'll see that like a little white collar, little white edge has been made to this blue abutment. Let's go to the next one. In this one, we're going to click on Auto Spacer and Zone if you want to go with the default values. So I'll just go without the default values to explain what's happening. So make sure it is selected, add spacer, and it'll prompt us how big we want our spacer to be. Okay. So this is set at 100 microns. Actually, it's 50 microns, 50 inside and 50 outside. Okay, so you can change this if you want to. This is for the cement spacer. And then we're going to accept the spacer. And notice that this blob has been merged with the die. Then we're going to add the zone, safety zone, and here you can change that depending on how thick you can actually mill, how thick you want your crown to be. So you can change this if you want to, and then accept the zone. Now if you want to do the automatic thing, we can do the automatic thing by simply clicking on that and auto spacer and zone. That takes the default values. Next, we're going to go to the occlusal adjustments. Now, these are vertical adjustments. We're going to view the antagonist, and we're going to select this antagonist, and we're going to make a cutter. So select antagonist and make a cutter, and this will close that object, and it'll create a 0.1 millimeter space around it, like an offset, similar to the block-out module. You can increase this here if you want to, and then or decrease it, and then apply offset. And this is so that the occlusal cut has been offset just slightly. Now the transparent clear is the object making the cut. Now this one you cannot select. We need to select our crown. Okay, and here we're going to select restoration for live trimming. This will then hide the object making cut, and we can then move this. Okay, so notice how it's actually cutting. Now we don't want to lose all of our nice anatomy. I'm going to move this down so we can move this in and out of occlusion. Okay, so we're going to leave it like this. Okay, so you can scale it if you want to, perhaps S to scale. So there's quite a lot you can do with it. Don't worry about the context at this stage. So once we're happy with that, we can edit the mesh. Now, this is quite important because we want a good emergence profile. So I'm going to left click and I'm going to move this move this down to where just sort of below that blue margin, the pencil line. This is to ensure we get a good emergence profile. Something like that. Like this is good. When this is done, we're going to then object mode. We can pull out the mesh in edit mode by 0.5 or push it down by 0.5. Then we're going to trim selected restoration, and that would have trimmed it perfectly. Next, if the margin was exposed, then we can make, if the green spacer would appear here, then we will then inflate or deflate. In this case, there's no green spacer visible. We can go to the next menu item. Here we will be generating the crown. So let's hide the antagonist, select your crown, and if you wanted to edit the mesh, we can still edit it at this stage. Then simply generate lower crown. There's an upper crown, lower crown, upper pontic, and lower pontic. So we're going to click on generate lower crown. So this would have adapted it to the die, and if we had green zone showing, we would then either inflate or deflate this, which we don't have in this example. So I'm going to be selecting it, and I'm going to smooth with protection. This means that the inside surface has been safeguarded. So it would smooth through the model. So no need to hide anything. Right, we can give this a gentle smooth as well. So now that that is done, exit. We are finished with this one. We're going to go to the next contacts. These are very important. So we're going to view the pink contacts. We're going to be selecting these contacts. Note I cannot select them at the moment. Click on the sign. Okay. Select one and select the other. We can do them separately, and this is so that we can create more distance but more gap in each one, or we can do them both at the same time. So I've selected both at the same time. We can click on auto contact cutter if we like, or we can go through the manual way of doing it. So let's do the manual way first. This has created a block out model, and this is set to 50 microns. So if you wanted more distance between these, you would then set this differently and then apply. And this has made our cutting tool. I'm going to go one step back, and we're going to click on Auto Cutting Tool. Now that we've got this cutting tool, I'm going to be selecting my crown, and we're going to then sculpt the contact. Don't worry about this one. This one is for a bridge. So we're going to shape contact for selected. Make sure it is selected, shape it. Now we cannot see through it, so we're going to hide the lower segment. And here we can then broaden the contact. Note, we actually can see through this. So as we're sculpting, it actually bulges through there. Okay. So we want to make sure that we've got a nice contact. Once that is done, we're going to cut this. And then we're going to go smooth with protection. So we get to smooth our contact down a little bit like this. And the other side as well. Notice the sharp edges, we want to get rid of those. Something like that. That's good. And then we're going to exit the smooth. Okay, and then what we can do is we can unhide everything else. Now that's basically it. We're not going to do the bridging, we're not going to do the copings, we're not going to do the frames, and we're not going to do the cutback in this one. Lastly, we're going to click on this, open up the last menu, and finish restoration to collection. This will then take the crown, duplicate it, and make sure there's no non-manifold edges, and then click on export. And then export your crown as we usually do, and then hide the finished restoration collection. That's all we do. If there's any questions or you need help, let us know. Thanks. Bye.